How you doing today? This is a lighting breakdown on an interview I did specifically to go about my workflow, how I work on a tighter budget, how I can utilize less lights, less equipment, and then how I can make an image like this, like these five stills I'm about to show you. So we'll start off by just going over the lighting setup. We used, and by we I mean me, I used a 1x2 panel, shooting with a little diffusion gel directly on there, shooting through some silk, just to give a little bit of that diffusion you see here, that fade, while still getting a strong highlight. You still get a nice gradient. You don't get anything crazy. It's not a harsh, sourcey light. And then you also get a big highlight here. You get a big highlight here. It kind of matches the level back here, which helps pull away from how bright it is. And that's something I had to work around because of the budget restraints I was on for this. And then we also had a wall of negative fill here with a little backlight panel here set to like 6,000 Kelvin, the little blue gel on there. It was set really cool. And then over here we had it set at 5,200 just to kind of mimic the daylight more than cooling it down. And so from here, we adjusted this panel to not only kind of give that backlight, which we were already getting with the window. The window gave a massive backlight, but this wrap here, this highlight here, that highlight down there, all of that is from this panel. It was a pretty powerful small panel. It was really sourcey, which we could get away with as a backlight. It gave more of a, the motivation was the window, but it wasn't hitting the face directly. So this like really strong highlight over here, at least to me, I wasn't bothered of the like little like highlight here, the little highlight there, the little highlight there, the highlight there. And I wasn't too bothered, and you'll see later on I have another still that shows that off a little bit. And so this was shot on a 50mm 1.8 Contax Zeiss lens. That's why that background is so creamy, because of the lens. It's a really creamy bokeh, and because we shot wide open at 1.8, we really didn't have to worry as much about that bright background to help distract from it, because this is out of focus. You're not focusing on this. This is sharp, this is tack, this is subject. You know that. I mean, also you already know that by an interview, but it's helping pull you away from seeing this really bright, just out of the ordinary contrasts, like from like a crushed black over here, possibly. Like you might consider this a lost little shadow. You might consider this like a lost little shadow. The shirt here is even hitting some level that's lost. In his neck, we're hitting some shadow that's lost. Like there's shadows that are lost. The blacks are crushed in certain areas. Like I can show you here. It's not all the way crushed, but there's definitely areas where you're not wanting that always, but you can definitely get away with it more leniently, or like not because you can get away with it, but that contrast ratio is just crazy, and I don't feel like it would look as acceptable if we had it at like a 2.8 even here, unless the like contrast ratio had dropped, which is actually something I'll show off later. But I'll just show off that false color one more time. Pretty strong contrast ratio. You see really bright, really overexposed, completely lost highlights. I'm okay with that. That's okay with me. That's fine. Our like shadows and blacks, they definitely are lost in certain areas. But once again, when you turn this off, when you turn off your false color, you can see they're technically lost or close to lost. It's not really a distracting image because of that. You see all the data that you need to, and it's an interview, so it's not something to stress over as much. This composition was actually a regret of mine, so we shot one camera and we just moved it around and then cut and spliced between. That one camera I was using was a URSA Mini 4.6K Pro, and so it had the internal ND. We were shooting on 6 stops here, I want to say it was. And so my issue between these two stills is just there's not a major change here. So if I wanted to change to one of these two, it was almost not worth it to go directly into it, just because it felt off. But anywho, same thing goes here with cinematography wise. We just went a little bit tighter. You still get that wrap. You still get this little wrap, which you can see a little bit more. You can see more of the highlights, and that's where I was getting to earlier. Pretty solid job. And then this is my favorite of the three on the 50. So we shot much closer, obviously, as you can see. And then with the 50, it once again gave him a really creamy background, which we actually got a little bit more exposure in the shot just because we were close to the window. And like because we were tighter, the focus got a little bit tighter to work with. And so like to me, this looks slightly out of focus. To me, this is sharp. So a tight face like that, this close, does give some issues in some situations, but it wasn't an issue for us. It was just, that's the look. It's such a tight, open aperture that that creamy background is there and present. And then you can see the highlights so much there. You can start to see the wrap. There's probably a second that you're going to be able to see the wrap in the stills. I'll show you the next one. You can see the highlights. You can see a little wrap coming up. It lifts the face from the negative fill, which is something I like to use in some interviews. I know it definitely can look really unprofessional in certain situations and like look really bad, but I don't see that here. Let me know if you do. And then we still get that little edge from the backlight, and that really helped. We get an edge from the sun as the backlight here. We get a nice little edge. It separates it. It looks nice, right? And all three of these were on sticks. I think that was obvious. And then we did continue the interview with some filler, like last minute questions that weren't as important on an Easyrig with a 28mm at f2.8. So we went down to 4 stops on the ND on the 2.8 aperture. So you can see with that, the older vintage lenses, sometimes depending on the model, the 28 specifically, the contrast does go down. You get a really good contrast on that 50 naturally. We didn't crush the contrast like crazy here. I mean, like obviously you do have good contrast because of that blown out window, because of those crushed shadows, but we didn't, like in post, I didn't do anything crazy. Here the contrast goes down, so that is one issue I ran into using these two lenses in a situation like this. They usually go really smoothly together. Like maybe a slight color shift in certain situations, but in this situation it didn't really matter to me there as much as it did. Like it definitely, there is some in post, usually typically it would be fixed, but it's not something that on a thing like this would be noticed, where it's very quick clips. It's not like I would adjust it before I would give it to a client, but just for this instance we're not going to go over that. It's the contrast that really gets me here, because you see here, you can see so much data, and obviously it's not getting like the sky, but even here, obviously you get a little bit less because it's just more open, but you can pretty clearly tell levels are not the same out there. We're getting some highlights down here, but we're also getting some more grounded highlights. Like we're getting still more blown out highlights, just like we do in here, but we're not getting anything grounded outside, really. Nothing is like lower than like an 80, whereas out here we're getting stuff closer to the 60. I'd argue certain areas here are closer to 50 range, and that's definitely like, it could be distracting if you're paying attention to it. So luckily this isn't like a narrative where you're stuck on a shot and you have to see that, but it's definitely something to keep attention for, and I would have done something different in this situation if that was something I thought of before post. It just wasn't a major concern for this though. And then once again, you see the highlight here coming from that panel, coming like past the shadows, and you also see that wrap a bit more. So I guess you can see this pretty well on the still too, which isn't even the one I was thinking of. That would actually be our last still, which you can see a lot of. That's one thing I like on this one. Once again, we're on the 28, so yeah, the contrast here is actually a bit better, but you still get a bit more grounded here. You still get a bit more grounded here. I'd argue over here, you get like here, here, and here. You're getting more grounded, but anyways, we're gonna focus on that backlight that we're using. So I'd argue you're getting the wrap starting here, where our negative fill was. That's pretty much all this, probably that ear, and then all of this, all that wrap that you're getting. That's coming from this little panel that's connected to the negative fill, connected to the T-bone. And then here, pretty much just this. Like, you're still getting some from the panel, just about that separation. Not much else except for the separation from the background. That's going to be the sun, just because the window, obviously, I can't really deny that. But we did have negative fill wrapped enough where I'm confident this wrap was coming from the panel. That's actually why we added it. We wanted to add some level like that. And I keep on saying we, I mean me. And then you still see, you get that highlight on the nose. You get a little highlight here of interest. And then you still can see, I guess now it's being used as more of a backlight. Whereas before it was most definitely a straightforward key. It's the backlight works though. It's, it's giving a wrap to almost act as a key still, but we're getting more level in this side, but we're backlighting essentially in this shot. For all intents and purposes, backlighting with a little bit of fill. The angle we're shooting from in this, we see shadow right in front of us. Wait, that was a bad line, but shadow to shadow. If we're shooting right here and all the light is coming from a direction behind the subject to some extent, we are shooting light over here, panel, the sun, and then this little fella was probably from the angle we're shooting at, technically behind. We're backlighting in this frame, which looked really good. It's just, I technically wouldn't shoot the entire interview here. This was more of just like a B-roll shot. Probably answered a question like this if I remember right. Very, very simple setup. I enjoyed the setup. It was, once again, probably under $120 for everything that I used in this, like a 1x2 panel with some diffusion, like a diffusion gel, like a white gel, and some silk. $50. The T-bone with the light stand, really cheap light stand, like an impact stand with the little grip arm that we made a T-bone out of, would probably be what, 40 once again. That puts us at like 80 for that leaves us $40 for a small little panel that can get you, I'd say we probably worked with a 45 watt panel, somewhere in that range, and a black cloth for negative fill. You could use black garbage bags, you could use Duvetine, depending on where you want to be budget wise. You could definitely get everything for about $120 or less, especially used on the market. Obviously the camera's a little bit less, obviously the lens is a little bit less, obviously you're not working with an Easyrig or Easyrig alternative for $120, but the lighting setup wise, you'll achieve a similar look shooting on a Canon DSLR relatively. Obviously you need ND there, but like you're not gonna get a crazy difference shooting on a Canon 5D Mark IV versus the URSA Mini 4.6K as long as you have ND in a situation like this. The lighting really did carry here, and that was appreciative. Anywho, that's it. That's all I've really got. So thanks for watching. Peace.